Mr. President, it's quiet around here. Where'd everybody go? Well, actually, it's a pleasure to be here. This will be my last speech of the year. And as I said yesterday in another speech, it's been an extraordinary honor and privilege to serve here in the United States Senate. I look forward to the next 5 years of doing that, God willing, and it's a phenomenal institution, and proud to be a part of it, even though some days make you scratch your head. I'm here on two things. Before we close out the year, I have a specific interest in items that impact the Western Hemisphere, and I'll take this opportunity to say that it's been one of the real treats of the last year is being able to work with Senator Menendez on the Western Hemisphere Committee. We share a lot of views in common, and even on the ones we don't, we have a very cooperative working relationship, and it's been a great experience to work with him on that, and I look forward to more of that next year on that committee and with everyone on foreign relations. I know that there are a lot of big domestic issues happening, but the things that are happening around the world matter. They matter a lot to us. And whether we realize it or not sometimes, and I know when times are tough economically, sometimes you wonder, well, why should we care what's happening halfway around the world? Well, we're not Luxembourg, with all due respect to Luxembourg. We're the United States of America. And what that means is that virtually every aspect of our life is directly impacted by things that are happening sometimes halfway around the world. One of the things that are always in our interests is the promotion of freedom and democracy. It's one of the things that sets us apart from other nations. It's our greatest export is the American example. The fact that people look to this country and see that it is possible for people to have self-government. And I know that self-government and that this republic sometimes looks messy from the outside looking in. As I tell people often, if you saw the way some of your food is made, you wouldn't eat it. And I think sometimes when you look at the political process and the lights that shine on it, there are some things about it in the process that I don't like and you don't like, but it's still better than virtually any other form of government that's ever existed on the earth. And we are all privileged and blessed to be able to live in this republic. And anytime we have the opportunity to speak out on behalf of democracy and freedom, we should. I had this week the opportunity to engage on that issue, and I want to publicly acknowledge the work of Undersecretary Sherman, who has spent a lot of time talking to me this week about Nicaragua and about elections in Nicaragua that were, in my opinion, fraudulent and unfortunate, because the rest of the hemisphere is moving towards democracy. The rest of the hemisphere is moving towards free and fair elections. And hey, in Latin America, sometimes people win elections that we don't agree with, people that don't like us, who believe that the national interests of their country are contrary to ours, but the people chose them. Unfortunately, what happened in Nicaragua is grotesque. This gentleman, or this person, Daniel Ortega, who was a Sandinista, who was once a dictator of that country, basically has ignored the Constitution, ran for office again. Extraordinary irregularities. They wouldn't let the Carter Center, for example, wasn't allowed to come in and observe it. The OAS has already talked about real problems with that election, and we hope to see their report soon. So let me publicly acknowledge the time and effort that the Department of State spent talking to me on the phone about ensuring that the United States is a forceful voice on behalf of democracy and freedom in Nicaragua and in the hemisphere, and I appreciate their work on that behalf. And I know we're looking forward to the OAS's report fairly soon. Senator Menendez and I have filed a resolution in this institution that I hope we will pass that recognizes the need for this country to stand firmly on the side of the Nicaraguan people on behalf of freedom and democracy. There's another issue I touched upon the other day, however, and that's this people-to-people travel to Cuba. And I kind of went through these itineraries a couple days ago that show that basically what these trips are all about is nothing more than tourism. It's just tourism. It's just people going to Cuba. And the reason why this is problematic is because it gives money to the Castro government. So today in the Miami Herald, there's this very disturbing article. And the article's titled is from Juan Tamayo, who's a reporter that writes for El Nuevo Herald and Herald, and it's called "Dissidents Send Out Images of Police Crackdown." It says, Cuban dissidents have sent out photos and videos of a large police crackdown in their eastern town of Palma Soriano that have left at least 5 government opponents with head wounds, black eyes, and other injuries. One photo of the December 2nd roundup of 46 dissidents shows Henry Perales with 2 wounds on his shaved head that required 9 stitches to close. Another shows Abraham Cabrera with 1 stitch on his forehead. Cabrera said, and I quote, "That wound bled a lot because it was on a blood vessel. But it was a kick to the ribs on the right side that made me fall to the ground. It still hurts," end quote. That's what Cabrera told El Nuevo Herald Friday night on the phone. The images were sent to the newspaper by Luis Enrique Ferrer Garcia, who's the U.S. representative of the dissident Cuban Patriotic Union. His brother, former political prisoner Jose Daniel Ferrer Garcia, heads the union and is one of the men arrested in the crackdown. Union members and supporters took 2 weeks to smuggle out the photos, and videos via emails because they had to work slowly and carefully to avoid police agents who were trying to find and seize the images. The Palma Soriano roundup was one of the largest and harshest police crackdowns on dissidents in recent years. All were freed hours or days later, one of them 12 days later without charges. 46 men had gathered in Palma Soriano's house, at the Palma Soriano house, starting on November 30th with plans to stage a street protest 2 days later to demand the release of all political prisoners and respect for human rights. Those sound like pretty reasonable requests to me. Release of political prisoner and respect of human rights. This is what they were going to protest on behalf of. Cell phone videos shot inside the house showed many of the dissidents saying they wanted to show that they were not U.S.-paid, quote, mercenaries, unquote, as the government brands them, but rather defenders of human rights. The unidentified narrator of some of the videos referred to the police already deployed outside, and he said, quote, and the repression that awaits us. So these protesters knew what was about to happen. They've seen this before. This is what happens in Cuba when you speak out in favor of human rights and against political prisoners. You get your head cracked open. These guys knew this was going to happen, but yet they had the bravery to go forward with it. Well, the police indeed did arrest the dissidents as they left the house in groups of 4 or 5, and a video taken from a second-story balcony showed them punching some of the protesters and forcing them onto a U.S.-styled yellow school bus parked at the end of the block. Cabrera said the bus driver, who was dressed in civilian clothes, hit him as well as Perales and several other dissidents with a wrench once inside the bus. The bus driver hit them with a wrench once they got inside the bus. Other photos showed dissidents Misael Valdez-Diaz and Alexis Yank with black eyes and Emilio Dinza with a large bump on his forehead. Other dissidents reported black and blues from police strikes. Angel Moya, a former political prisoner who was reported beaten in a police station after his arrest, said police punched him on the way from the house to the school bus, but not afterwards. How nice of them, not to punch him afterwards. Moya said Friday that he spent 12 days in a police lockup in a cell that was smelly and had no water, no lights, and that he shared with common criminals. This is Cuba. I doubt that this experience is something that these tourists traveling on U.S. licenses are going to get to see on their next visit to Cuba. So the other day I talked about this, one of these visits that the United States has licensed. It's called Ethics in the Cuban Revolution. How interesting. Ethics in the Cuban Revolution. I wonder if part of that ethics course will be the part about school bus drivers or bus drivers dressed as civilians hitting protesters with a wrench. I wonder if that's part of their itinerary. I wonder if the part about cracking people's heads open because they're going to peacefully protest in the street are part of the itinerary in this ethics and the Cuban Revolution. Why do I bring this up again? Number one, it's an outrage. This should be denounced, and this is a great forum to do it because the world needs to know what happens 90 miles from our shores. It's one of the most repressive regimes in the Western Hemisphere's history. It's still in place. It's still ongoing. But here's number two. Where do they get the money to pay these people? Don't you think this guy's getting paid? The civilian bus driver is getting paid to hit people with a wrench, or do you think he's doing it for free? How are they paying these police officers? How do you get people to do this stuff? You have to pay them. And where do they get their money to pay them? Cuba, their government is a fiasco, and they don't know anything about the economy. You want to know why the Cuban economy is in the tank? It's because the people that run Cuba are incompetent. They have no idea about what a modern economy looks like or how to create one, apart from the fact that they cling to a broken ideology. So where do they get the money to pay for all these things? And sadly, where they're getting a lot of the money to pay for these things, it's from us. It's from people who live in this country that are curious about what happens in Cuba, that are curious, and some who outright sympathize with this idea that somehow Cuba is this socialist paradise, and they travel there, and they leave money there. All these trips, Cuba gets a huge take, and they use it to fund this repressive apparatus. So as I said the other day, look, I understand, I don't have any false illusions that the president's going to change his travel policy towards Cuba or these people-to-people programs, but at least make sure that these programs are really furthering what you say you're trying to further, which is bringing freedom and democracy to Cuba, instead of being a source of hard currency and hard revenue. And so a few days ago, I denounced 2 specific itineraries. I didn't denounce 10 or 5. I pointed out 2 of the most outrageous ones on this floor in a speech I gave. And then I sent that to the State Department. I said, would you look at this for me? And they responded that they would. And they told me they would send me a letter, and in fact, in conversations I had, they gave me great hope that in fact they too were troubled by these itineraries and that they would start to look at these more seriously. Sadly, as a result of what they told me, Because one of the things that's been going on around here is I had placed a hold on 2 nominations in the Western Hemisphere as a result of their inaction on this issue. Well, after I spoke to him on the phone, I was hopeful about it. I lifted those holds. We were going to vote on those here today. Then I got this letter today that basically, to summarize it, basically says, thank you for your letter, but we can't talk to you about it. Well, that's not what I expected to get. And so we're going to hold those nominations again until we take this seriously. This is a problem. This is a problem. We have these companies in America that are advertising tourism to Cuba. Tourism that is not just a source of irritation, it is a source of hard currency. It is the money that this regime is using to crack people's heads, to pay bus drivers or so-called bus drivers to beat people with wrenches. It's the money they're using to stick people in jails and common criminals with no access to food or water for 12 days without charges. We are funding a repressive regime through these practices, and it has to stop. And someone better take this seriously. And when they take this stuff seriously, then we can talk. And so I hope that's where we're headed here in the coming year, is that we'll stand on the side, and not just on the side of the Cuban people's desire for freedom, democracy, no political prisoners, respect for human rights, but the hemisphere and the world. Our voice still matters, and I hope this country will always stand firmly on the right side on these issues. So before I left today, I wanted to come here on the floor and talk about this, because this is something that's very important to me and should be very important to our country. And I hope that in the coming year, we will have an opportunity in our subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, in this body, and in our conversations with the White House and the State Department to bring these programs into focus. This people-to-people program is a sham. Maybe they're very well-intentioned, but some of these trips are nothing more than tourism that plows millions of dollars into the hands of one of the most disgusting and grotesque repressive apparatuses that this hemisphere has ever seen, and it has to stop. Someone needs to start cracking down on these people. Someone needs to start cracking down on these agencies. Someone needs to start cracking down on these trips and make sure that they do what they are intended to be, and that is real access to the ways of freedom, to the ways of opportunity, to opening the eyes of the Cuban people to the fact that the rest of the world does not live under what they live under, even though most Cubans know that. It's time that we start holding people accountable. If they're filing these licenses under false pretenses, they need to be prosecuted. Their licenses need to be suspended. They need to be barred from having these trips. We should stop. We need to have people that actively monitor these itineraries that are being sold. They need to match their applications for the licenses. And we need to stop approving licenses for these tourist trips. And I hope we'll make progress on that in 2012. And I hope that that's what we'll focus on in the year to come. So with that, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.